Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to this EFSA Scientific Colloquium on cell culture-derived foods and food ingredients. My name is Helle Knudsen. My regular work is at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health in Oslo, but I'm also a member of the NDA panel. That's the abbreviation for the panel on nutrition, novel food, and allergens. I'm also chairing the working group on novel food, which is under the same panel. Today and tomorrow, I have the honor to be the overall chair of this colloquium. We all know that our diets have been changing over the last decades. When I grew up during the 60s and 70s, for me, that's of course the near past, not for all of you. But I'm not eating the same things now that I did then. And of course, there are similarities, but the way of producing food, I think, is quite different. Then somebody told me it's the same time distance between 1970 and now as it is between 1970 and 1917. And in that, in that perspective, I think the diet has without doubt changed, and a lot of other things have also changed. But in this workshop, we are looking into the future diet. We do not know which role this cell-cultured food or food produced by precision fermentation, which role this will have in our diets. And what we do know is that we have to make sure it's safe, and that's why we are gathered here today and tomorrow. And today, before lunch, we will have some general talks during the opening session, and that will set sort of the scene for the breakout sessions that we will have later today. The summing up of the outcomes of the breakout sessions will be done tomorrow in the plenum. It's also the case that a lot more people wanted to attend this colloquium than it was room for physically or practically. And then you should be aware that the plenary sessions are all web streamed or live streamed, and they will also be made available online after the colloquium. And relating to this, we have some housekeeping rules for all of you who are here in the room. We will indicate to you when you can ask questions, and it will be done by me or somebody else who is moderating. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, then please raise your hand, and then you will have to wait for the microphone so that also people who are following by web will be able to hear you. And when you finally receive the microphone, please state who you are and your affiliation, and keep your question or comment short, because we have a lot to cover during these sessions. Then, if time allows, it will be a possibility to ask questions or make comments after each of the talks or each of the sub-sessions. But if there's no time left for your question, then please take a note, because it might be possible to raise it during the breakout sessions or perhaps in the discussion tomorrow. So I hope this workshop will be engaging and informative, and that we will have a lot of opportunities to exchange ideas and share knowledge. I'm looking very much forward to the discussions and to learn during this workshop. Now, it's time for me to introduce the first speaker of this morning session. It's Guillaume de Cesse. who's head of the Risk Assessment Production Department at EFSA. And he's participating online and will explain the objectives of this colloquium. So please, you have the floor, Guillaume.
Thank you very much, Helle. Can you hear me well? Yes. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this EFSA Scientific Colloquium 27, Self-Culture-Derived Foods and Food Ingredients. Hello said, my name is Guillaume Desèze. I'm the head of the Risk Assessment Production Department at EFSA, and I am very pleased to open this colloquium. So we heard it, the agri-food sector is innovating, has been innovating for a while, will continue to innovate. Recently, advances in fields such as tissue engineering, cell culture, synthetic biology are paving the way for new technological approaches and products. And among these, cell culture-derived foods of animal or plant origin and food ingredients produced through precision fermentation stand out. In the European Union, these kind of products require pre-market authorization under different sectoral regulatory framework. We will hear a little bit more about this morning from our colleague from the European Commission, Bruno Gautret. But in this respect, cell culture-derived foods are not unique. New kind of food arrive on our table in the European Union all the time, driven, for instance, by globalization of exchanges or by the search for new sources of nutrient. And our role in EFSA is to provide scientific advice and carry out risk assessment to enable the European Commission, the risk manager, to decide on the authorization of these novel food applications. So the process is working since 2018. When the process started to be centralized in EFSA, we have completed almost 100 risk assessments for novel food. We being EFSA, that means the EFSA staff and the scientific panel in charge of novel food, which is the scientific panel for nutrition, novel food, and allergens. You may have heard, for instance, recently about our risk assessment of insect-derived food products, which is done under this novel food framework. So overall, this novel food framework is running very well, always keeping with the short legal deadlines that are put on the scientific assessment, which enables novel food to reach the market timely and safely. Timeliness of the scientific assessment, however, depends on the quality of the proposed application and the amount of additional information that EFSA may have to request during the risk assessment to conclude on its scientific advice. So it is thus very important that on one hand, EFSA knows how to set clear data and information requirements for applicants to provide everything that is needed. And on the other hand, it's important that applicants understand how to fulfill those requirements. So to help in this process, EFSA has a number of measures like guidances, technical guidances, documents, or also a series of services for applicants. But to be able to continue to offer this clarity as innovation is progressing and therefore supporting the authorization process, there is no choice. EFSA risk assessment methodology and expertise must keep abreast of technological developments. And with this in mind, in this scientific colloquium, we have brought together relevant experts and stakeholders on the topic of food and food ingredients derived from cell culture to have an exchange on ongoing trends and research, as well as on the requirements for keeping EFSA's risk assessment fit for purpose, because this is what it is about ultimately. So with this colloquium, we want to achieve three things. First, to identify the different sectors in the agri-food system to which the topic of cell culture is relevant. Then, to review the state of the art of all the relevant concepts, technology, and derived products in this field. And finally, to discuss the emerging safety and methodological aspect, and of course, the impact that will have on EFSA's risk assessment approaches. So in the next 2 days, we will go through at these 3 main high-level objectives, focusing on 2 areas. The first one is the area of cell culture-derived foods of animal or plant origin. And the second area is precision fermentation and new developments in engineered microbial cell factories. So those 2 areas will be covered each via presentations in the plenary and via several breakout sessions. So a very rich program ahead of us today and tomorrow. So thank you very much to all for having joined us today in Brussels or via web streaming. We have received, I read yesterday, more than 1,000 registrations from 62 countries, representing many different sectors in the field. So a lot of interest in this event, and thank you very much for this. This is very promising for the next couple of days. I want to give my special thanks to our experts. First, our chair, Helle Knudsen. Thank you very much, Helle, and to all experts and colleagues who have been actively contributing to prepare this event. We have speakers from leading institutions who will give us the latest perspective from Europe, but also internationally. I'm very pleased and eager to listen this morning to the perspective from our colleagues in WHO and in FAO. So again, a very rich program in content, but also with the diversity of views that will be exposed. And on behalf of EFSA, thank you very, very much for all of you to have joined us today in this event. And I just stop here. And one thing to do is to wish you many fruitful discussions and a very exciting exchange of ideas. Please carry on with this exciting event. Thank you. The floor back to you.
Thank you a lot for these warm words. The first topic out today is international perspectives on cell culture-derived foods and food ingredients. And we have 2 speakers in this session, and they will have approximately 10 minutes each, and then we will have questions in the end. So the first speaker out is Masami Takeuchi from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, good morning. Is it working? Okay, perfect. Okay, should I talk on the podium or maybe that's better?
Easy for you, I think.
Yep. I would just time myself so that I will leave enough time for my co-presenter. My name is Masami Takeuchi. Thank you very much for having me here today. Special thanks to Anna. We're here. Okay, Anna, thank you very much. And then also Andrea, my good friend at EFSA. Thank you so much for this invitation to talk about our activities at FAO. My presentation is entitled Global Perspectives, but more I will talk from the FAO angle, and then my colleague from WHO, the Moes, is going to talk through the WHO angle. So hopefully that we will complement each other of our joint activities, and then the food production for the cell-based food, and then also the precision fermentation that I deal with. That is my topic. Second slide, please. Do I do this? Okay. Okay, how it started was that those 4 non-EU countries have approached us at FAO. Of course, that the first country was Singapore in already 2017. That I was talking with the authority about whether or not we need to have some sort of international guidance on the safety assessment of the cell-based food, because Singapore has been talking with some of the leading industry in the cell-based food production. So that was the start. So usually that United Nations organizations are a little bit behind of the development, but then this time we were able to catch up with the development speed, and we were able to start talking about this topic together with Singapore. And then Israel, Qatar has a special 2 different approach of the authorization, not really for the consumption yet, but then for Israel it's more of the process that the industry is asking, and in Qatar, the industry was asking whether or not if it is possible to have a production facility approval. And then, of course, that that US FDA has issued already 2 results for the pre-market consultation from the cell-based food company. So this is what it is happening at this moment. FAO started forming this technical working group in 2021 based on the approval issued by Singapore, and then we thought that it would be a good idea to have some sort of session among the regulatory agencies to discuss lessons learned and what worked, what didn't work, a very informal technical working group. And then EFSA has just recently joined this informal technical working group, so that's great that we have an entire EU insights included. And then we have WHO is also joining this year, so I'm very excited about this progress, and we'll be talking about quite informally that what is it that it is really necessary to talk at the global level. So this is some sort of think tank for FAO at this moment. And this is the roadmap that I had back in 2021, and then somehow I was able to go through all the way through to the 2023. We did a call for experts and data back in 2021. We developed some literature synthesis document that I'm going to explain later. And then 2022, that the biggest barrier at that time was that not so much scientific information was readily available in the public domain. So we really didn't know that exactly what kind of technologies and techniques and equipment and materials being used to develop this kind of products. So what we did was that the stakeholder roundtable meeting, so that industry colleagues, startups, and then all the university researchers can come and then tell us about what they are doing. So it was really, really useful because we were able to be on the first line of the production so that we can really see that what they are doing. And then most fascinating thing at the time was that they brought some photos of their products, and then I was thinking that some sort of products that come out of the laboratory at that time, but then it was not. It was fully developed. And then the photo I saw was quite good quality, and then I couldn't really tell that it was coming from experimental facility. It was more on the pilot facility, and then also not really large scale, but then a little bit scale-up production process. So no longer coming out of the laboratory anymore. It was really a food production facility product. So that was 2022. And then WHO joined the force, very nice. And then we had expert consultation in Singapore at the end of 2022. And then what we did was that food safety hazard identification. As you know, if you are very familiar with the risk analysis paradigm, that risk assessment has 4 steps. And then the risk hazard identification is the very first step, that we have to identify the potential hazards, otherwise we cannot really assess the risk. So just I will talk about this difference between hazard and risk later. But then after this hazard identification is finished, now that is the time that we are trying to disseminate what we have and then what we documented, what experts found out. So this is a part of the dissemination activities. I'm very grateful that EFSA is having this meeting. Very earlier that I explained about the literature synthesis way before we did the expert consultation, we had to do those 3 preliminary topics to be really documented and captured. The fact-based information had to be collected. First one is terminology. It is still a headache, but then we have to figure out that what to call it. So we cannot keep calling it. So we have to figure out, even though that we don't have a perfect terminology, that we have to really come up with some sort of working terminology. So that was the literature synthesis that we worked on. Second one was also challenging because, as you can imagine, that cell-based food can be of any kind of animal cells or plant cells or microorganism cells. So basically that it is very wide variety of the things that we are talking about. For example, if we are going to have beef burgers or chicken strips or, like all different, some people make a kangaroo meat, right? And then somebody created a mammoth meat too. So if you can think about it, the production process can be very different. So it is very difficult for us to figure out how to generalize the production process, but then we were able to have some sort of high-level production steps, which we came up with the 4 steps that I am going to show you later. So that was a very good exercise at that moment. And then number 3 is the regulatory framework. It's like a snapshot that we wanted to find out what countries have done what, and then where we are standing. So this is something that we have at this moment. And then not so many countries are really ready to do the safety assessment. So I think that lots of countries can relate to this. And then also we conducted 3 country case studies. You don't have to see the chart because they are all inside of the publication that I am going to introduce. But then those 3 countries, Israel, Qatar, and Singapore, those are the countries who were asked by the industry to tell them that what kind of regulatory processes exist. So we wanted to showcase that the 3 different countries' situation in terms of the regulatory approval systems in this cell-based food production. And then at the time, only Singapore had a particular concrete regulatory frameworks, but then Israel and Qatar are still in discussion and then also in development of the processes. But then very interesting results here is that 3 countries have completely different systems. I mean, starting from the terminology and then how they categorize, how they group the process together, everything is so different. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, that we have close to 200 countries in the world. And then if those 3 countries are completely different, we have so many different variety of the categorization, regulatory framework, how they do the assessment, and then how they categorize the results and then categorize the product. So I think that this is something important. So as I mentioned, a stakeholder meeting was conducted in Israel in July last year, and then we talked about the latest development, and then industry was really looking for information from the regulators. That was a very positive impact that left to FAO and WHO, because that they are not really having a first-hand information. They want to know exactly what it is that the food safety requirements exist, and they want to really comply. So this was a very good message that we received. They don't want to go ahead and do the development. They want to wait for the regulators to tell them what are the things that they have to be very careful about. But then the problem is that they don't have much information of that. So Israeli government was really giving them some information about what kind of elements they need to consider for the food safety dossier. So that was a very good meeting. And then we talked about terminology. Just very quickly, that the FAO and WHO is now using the cell-based food. But then just mind you that the cell-based food is not quite scientific, let's say, because just like plant-based food too. I mean, okay, it's the cell-based, I mean, everything can be including cells. So we can say anything can be cell-based. But the difference is that we have never used this terminology of cell-based in the past. So consumers will be able to realize that something is different. So this is most important. I think that our social scientist experts was explaining to us that, okay, science is important, but then strictly scientific doesn't necessarily mean the best terminology choice, because the purpose is not to confuse consumers, not to mislead consumers, not to create a confusions with the consumers. So sometimes we have to come to some sort of compromise. And then we pick some words, and then good news to EFSA and EU is that the cell culture-derived food is one of the recommended terminologies. So I think that now most important thing is that we try to brainstorm, and then I understand that the international harmonization is useful, and international harmonization is probably very, very important. But then at the same time, we have 6,500 languages in the world. So if we try to translate the terminology into those local languages, we start losing the context of it. So it may be important to think about the terminology in the local sense first, and then understand that what is it that we have to figure out. Okay. I have about 2 minutes. Okay, so expert consultation, we had about 23 experts and resource people from 15 different countries participated in the meeting. And then, as I mentioned, that the hazards are not risks, right? And then the first step, that the hazard identification, we look at everything. So anything that could be potentially hazardous agent. And then number 3, exposure assessment of the former process of the risk assessment. We cannot do that because there is not much of exposure of the cell-based food. So we concluded we won't be able to do the risk assessment in a full-fledged way. So what we decided was that let's finish the first step of the hazard identification. And as I said, that this generic production process, we started saying that the first step is cell sourcing, and second step is cell production, third is cell harvesting, and then fourth step is food processing and then forming the product. So this is the 4 production phases that we used. We identify the hazards according to it. And then the conclusion was that the many hazards were already well known, and then something that is already existing in the most of the conventionally produced food products. And then also that even if some of the materials and equipment and then some products and then, like a growth media, growth factors could be new, could be something newly introduced, in the end, that the detection and then the mitigation and controlling is quite similar, the methodology or approaches that we have been using in the past. So this is something that the experts were saying. And then also the various control measures that are already existing can be applicable to make the food safety plans. And then, but then again, that if anything is new, anything is unique to cell-based food production, of course, those are the hazards that we have to pay attention to. And then we may be able to further look into something that could be potentially new in the production. And communication, that the experts were saying that communication strategizing and then also very carefully done, inclusive of this nomenclature issue, is very important as this risk assessment itself. Because even if we do a wonderful job in risk assessment, if we cannot communicate the results properly, that it doesn't mean much. So basically that the experts were saying that we do have to do it in parallel in a very good way to combine the communication into the risk assessment. As soon as we do the risk assessment, we have to start thinking about how we communicate this to a wide variety of different stakeholders. And this is the moment that the experts were saying, because not much products available outside in the market. So this is the time that we have to really engage and then think about how to strategize the communication. And then We did this global follow-up of the webinar, and then we published through the codex and then also the FAO and WHO publication. I will show you the QR code soon, but very quickly about precision fermentation. I think we will go back to the same process, that we will start with the basic literature synthesis, and then we will do the hazard identification, and we have to probably deal with the nomenclature issues as similar to cell-based food nomenclature issue. So here is the QR code. I hope that you will enjoy reading the document. Thank you. Over to you, Mas.
Thank you, Masami. The next speaker is Moe Sana from the World Health Organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. It's always a pleasure to participate to EFSA Colloquium. I remember my first one was in 2006. It was the 4th Colloquium. I really like this setting and open discussion. So today I will continue the presentation of my colleague from FAO, and it is mainly about, from the WHO, it's mainly about how to manage the food system transition and transformation for healthy and sustainable diets. So innovation, of course, will play a big role for that. And as Guillaume at the beginning said, we need to have the good assessment of safety and in timely manner and with the excellence of and the robust scientific approaches. Next, please. Yes, I have it here. So I will not repeat, I will not give you a lot of figures about millions of deaths linked to malnutrition, but what we can agree that our food systems are broken and we need to fix it. And we need to fix it with different approaches. There is no one single approach. One of them is about driving significant dietary changes that will support the sustainability system. So this is very important to better define the health diets, what we call healthy diets, how to recommend. We started in WHO to do a lot of work on nutrition, on nutrients, macronutrients, and we are moving to more food-based guidelines that will come soon. And we need to better explain to the consumer and help them to shift from less sustainable and healthy diet to more sustainable and healthy diets. And there is different solution, more sustainable agricultural practices. And you can see those from Europe perspective. When you look at farm-to-fork strategy, we can find those different solutions in this strategy. So better agricultural practices, decreasing food waste, circular economy, more sustainable farming practices, plant-based food, meat produced in bioreactors. I didn't say cell-based or cell culture-based. I will not enter in this debate on terminology. And insect, microalgae, and others. And when you look at all those solutions, there is a lot of innovation, new technology, new approaches that need to be addressed. And yes, today we are talking about emerging, advancing technology that will able to produce animal cell through synthetic biology, animal cell culture technology, and so on. But the main question here, are our methodologies for risk and safety assessment equipped to support the regulatory system? And now, when you look at the problem, I said that there is different promises when we are developing those technology. First, we need to have new food production system that provide nutritious and healthy foods. Second, the consumer, part of the consumer, they will move this new production because they think for certain ethical reason, mainly animal welfare, for example, but there is other ethical reason. They do it as well because they want to participate to more sustainable and to promote more sustainable production. And they need to have some trust about those production because they need to have them safe. And of course, we need, food is not only about feeding people, but there is always consumer experience. So like you know, this UX for the IT. So we can think as well for food about what is the consumer experience. So now for the moment, Masami said you see a lot of pictures. However, the main picture, there's a lot of makeup. So see here one example, what is served in Singapore restaurants. So, okay, this is cell-based chicken, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of makeup. We try to create a good experience, but it is part of the food as well. And those new foods, could we use the same recipes that you are using today with the regular meat? So there's a lot of development to make it acceptable by the consumer and as well affordable. Because when we are talking about sustainable food system, the foods need to be attractive and as well affordable. This is very important. So, and now one of the questions that we have, our system of safety assessment is always working in silos. But when you look at the evaluation, it's not only about nutrition and food safety. We need to take into account all those domain of criteria. And are we ready today to take into account the trade-offs between those all different criteria? In one hand, environment criteria, other hand about food safety, nutrition, and how we will do those trade-offs. So for the moment, we are starting mainly with the food safety. We did some work, very important step, but we need to continue with the food safety question. What is needed from the industry? And they ask really very clear questions. What you need as information, what you need as data that we can submit them to have to check and to validate that their processing system is producing safe foods. So we need to go through a lot of work. For example, we said, yeah, any pathogen, when you are processing the food, the common pathogen that you know, Listeria, monocytogenes, Salmonella, other, can contaminate those food. But we have no experience about how those pathogens will behave in this new matrix. So we need a lot of data, but for the moment, the majority of the industry, they are not thinking about food safety. They are more thinking about the technology, about how to scale up the system. So we need to help them thinking in a timely manner, how to develop, how to generate new data to validate the safety of those products. And for nutrition, this is the next step that you want to, and we have a lot of questions about nutrition, the protein quality, fatty acid composition, carbohydrate composition, vitamins and minerals, other bioactive compounds. I will not go in the details because we don't have too much time, but I can contribute during the discussion, give you more information about this topic, about how we can evaluate the quality of the nutrition quality of those new food systems. And now, because we have those different criteria, I think we need to go beyond risk assessment and risk and safety assessment. It is mainly about risk-benefit assessment. And I know that EFSA now is working for more integrated approach for risk-benefit assessment. And I think here, perhaps we need to go beyond the classical way to do the assessment. We look at the benefit or opportunity of those new production to have more sustainable system and to offer more healthy food for the consumer. So I will end with this one. So there is a high demand for scientific advice and risk assessment and benefit assessment. I think this, we share with EFSA those concerns. What we need robust scientific advice, sound excellence in science. We need open approach, transparency. We need inclusive approach. We need a rapid development of risk assessment and scientific advice, and we wanted data-driven. But when you look at the cell-based food, something that we need to do all that without experimental animals. So how can we use the new approaches for risk assessment? This is one of the challenges. But a lot of obstacles because we are still in development. There's a lot of secrets, very competitive, sharing data, knowing exactly what is in the technology is very difficult, very hard. You have it at high level, but you cannot have it at all the stages. So there is no open data, no sharing, no much transparency, still uncertainty. We don't have experts. We are learning. As experts, we are general experts from them. You are learning once we start the risk assessment and scientific advice for those new products. And it's becoming complex because it's taking into account different criteria, not only safety, not nutrition, but sustainability, consumer experience, and because what we want that new technology be used and contribute to our sustainable goals, because the situation of the food system is not good for the moment, and we need to bring more innovation to the system. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to the speakers. In view of time, I don't think we have time for questions right now, so I think we will have to take those later on. The next topic today is a regulatory framework that enables food innovation in the EU. And I'm happy to welcome Bruno Gautres, and he's the head of the unit in the European Commission that is dealing with novel foods and their legislation. So please, you have the floor.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bruno Gautres, indeed, representing here more the risk management side of the equation. And thank you for inviting the Commission to this important conference. Indeed, I hope that will be very fruitful, because we need good science to make well-informed decisions on a solid basis, and especially on safety. This is true for all novel foods, but that is of essence, where trust is of essence, but even more for cell culture-derived foods or food products. Why? These foods generate already a lot of debate and are sometimes depicted as Frankenstein food. The way it's produced is complex and uses many highly sophisticated and evolving materials and processes. As we have seen recently with insects, some see the development of certain novel foods as threatening our traditions and habits, and even our cultural heritage. These products bring a number of legitimate questions. What about sustainability? How to name these products and not mislead consumers? This is indeed a very important question, and we can, of course, in the EU with our 23, I think, languages, be a good test for a good discussion on this. What are the expectations? The consumers, they want to know what they eat. Is it GM? Is it something else? They want to know, of course, if it's safe, if it's healthy. Is it sustainable? That's a question which comes more and more, as you just said. And can I afford the product? Where can I find it? Where the businesses, they want a predictable and stable legal environment, legal certainty that enables them to invest in the long term and have a good visibility. A system that allows innovation and anticipate these kind of developments. And regulators, they want or they need good science. And that's why you're gathered these 2 days. we need a clear scientific advice, and I know it's sometimes challenging, and it will be even more for these kind of products. We want responsible operators who share data, who try to be honest, and let's say build a trustful relation. Also when the product is on the market, actually, when you also monitor the effects or let's say, give feedback on the uses and possible side effects. The question was, are the countries ready for these products in terms of regulatory landscape? I would say that in the EU, we are ready. We have a regulatory framework which addresses most of the expectations I just listed. It's in place since 2018, basically, where the legislations became applicable, so 5 years, so relatively recent, and applies to cell culture-derived food. The key question when we will receive an application is it GM-derived food or not? If it is GM, then it will be handled through the GM legal framework. If not, then that would fall under the novel food legislation, which is dealt with, again, in my unit. I know that also precision fermentation will be discussed these 2 days. For us, there is no legal definition of precision fermentation. So there is thus a need for a case-by-case assessment of the relevant legislation. These products must be subject to. Is it a GM? Is it a novel food? Is it an enzyme or an additive? That's really an assessment we have to do for every file we would receive. And as science and techniques evolve, this analysis has to be done carefully within the existing legal environment. What is a novel food in the EU? It's food not used for human consumption to a significant degree before the 15th of May 1997, and that falls under at least one of the 10 listed categories. So that's basically a food which was not consumed 30 years ago. So that's a significant range, but that's how the legislation was built. These categories you can see here, so that was already very broad, I would say, and you see that the co-legislators already had foreseen this category of cell cultured derived food, but there are others, as you can see, and we are ready for innovation. More precisely, the cell-based food as a novel food would fall under the category food consisting of, isolated from, or produced from cell culture, or tissue culture derived from animals, plants, microorganisms, fungi, or algae. So this definition captures the food products we are talking about today and will bring here legal certainty. So there is a framework. What are the objectives of the legislation? They are clear. It's to bring safe novel food products to the market, to protect the consumer's interests, and to promote the good functioning of the EU internal market. In other words, novel foods must be safe, not mislead the consumer, and not be nutritionally disadvantageous. These will be the guiding principles also for cell culture-derived food or food products. Briefly, the process for the authorization. In these 2 days, there will be also colleagues present either in the room or in the corridors if you have specific questions on the authorization process. But basically, it's an applicant submitting an application file through an electronic system only. Then EFSA, there is a first of a validity check, I would say. Then it goes to EFSA for the scientific assessment. we get an opinion from EFSA, and on this basis, we discuss with member states to ultimately vote on a proposal by the Commission on the authorization of a given product, where we need a qualified majority of member states, and then the Commission grants the authorization to the applicant. Graphically, we would be on the right side of the graph, an application file. EFSA has, in principle, 9 months to assess the science part of the dossier. It could be longer if there is a need for more data. You can stop the clock, and then I guess that for such innovative products that could take longer than the 9 months, as it was the case, for example, for insects. And then, again, on the basis of the opinion, we go to, the Commission has 7 months also to issue the authorization, or at least make a decision, and of course needs to discuss it with member states and the standing committee before it can update the union list of novel foods. This is the content of an application file. You see that it's rather thorough. Again, submitted electronically, and a summary is published on this website. The EFSA opinion and marketing authorization answer the questions obviously asked by the legislation, and it's mainly on safety. The authorization will indicate the specifications of the product, its conditions of use, and possibly specific labeling requirements. So that will all be part of the authorization. As regards other questions, we spoke about sustainability, for example, or carbon print or whatever. This will not be part of the authorization. That means also that this debate, these questions have to be raised elsewhere and answered elsewhere. But I think in this case of cell culture-derived food, that is of course very important. And on this, there are some research programs, financed or not by the Commission. Of course, there are also private initiatives, but there is investment there to support the research programs and know more about these products and their potential impact. So, as a conclusion, no surprise, we apply the legislation, and we work on this basis of this rather recent legislation, 5 years old. We have no preconceived idea or approach or opinion on these products. We will judge on the basis of the facts, and here, indeed, there is a need for good science and let's say, convincing science to enable food innovation while guaranteeing a high level of safety and consumer protection. So this is why we think that the content and the discussions that we have today and tomorrow are very important, and we hope that they will pave the way for easy and undisputable risk management decisions on cell culture-derived foods. I wish you a good conference.
Thank you very much. Now I think we have time for some questions. First for Bruno, and then perhaps for the two first speakers. So I think we can afford to spend a few minutes before the coffee break. So please raise your hand if you have any comments or questions. Yes? And please remember to state who you are.
Thank you. My name is Hideki Katagiri. I'm coming from Wageningen University. I want to ask a question for the first speakers. And you mentioned like both FAO and WHO, and especially I think the FAO has some research about risk assessment for really global perspective. But how do you proceed with like this kind of movement? Especially how do you affect on the global it's not necessarily standardization, but like of course, as you mentioned, like many countries are doing their own initiative, but also like it's possible to consider like how this should be standardized. And I understand like FAO and WHO can do something about this. So what is your plan for this kind of really global harmonization? And also like, is this also like a codex on like affecting this way? So yeah, how and who will do this? So.
Thank you very much for a very good question. Standardization is basically done not for everything, right? I mean, we are not regulating every single aspect of the food at this moment, and that's why that we employ this risk analysis paradigm, which is based on the risk that we prioritize the issues so that we will start regulating, standardizing from the top important level of things. So for this particular topic of the cell-based food and precision fermentation, that first thing that we have to figure out is that is there lots of high-risk situations, or is there anything that we really have to consider? And then not necessarily risks only, but then sometimes that we do have to address concerns, even though those concerns from the consumers may not be super scientific or strictly risk-based. If there are significant level of the concerns, then I think that regulators need to address those concerns. So I think that idea that we have to have is that is it worthwhile to have a proper process and then also the standardization at the national levels. And this question is being asked to every single country, basically. And then for EU, that you have EU groups, so Commission and then also EFSA can, of course, that employ experts' opinions to understand that what is the level of the necessary requirements. And then you may go to the direction of standardization or harmonization, but then I would urge you to think about the situation that there are countries who may not be able to do that. So I think that in the world that there would be some sort of inequality would be introduced. In that sense, that FAO and WHO would really like to help those countries from the low and middle income countries. And then we try not to have burdens, both burdens. First burden is that the situation that you cannot control the food safety situation. Second burden is that because of the lots of regulatory requirements and the regulatory work that may overburden those regulators. So that's the way that we are thinking from the global perspectives, that we have to help those countries to be equipped with the scientific knowledge so that it can go into either ways that countries want. And then if they need to standardize, if they want to have a harmonization at the global level, FAO and WHO would like to be ready to help. So this is the situation. Do you want to add?
I think Moise wants to make a comment, and I think that's the last we have time for.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask something about Codex Alimentarius. Within the executive committee of the Codex Alimentarius, there is a discussion about new production system, new sources of food, and there is a discussion, do we need a new technical committee to address that? Because for the moment, as you know, we have GECFA, we have GMPR, we have different approaches, but still working in silo. But we recognize that the different countries are not ready today to have this approach, holistic approach. And that's why WHO, with different partners, with key food safety authority or food safety agency, providing scientific advice and risk assessment to create a platform. We call it a forum, a GLORIA, Global Risk Assessment Platform or Forum, for which we bring having think tank. It's not mainly for harmonization, but at least to have better understanding of the scientific challenges and on the risk assessment challenges that we have. And it will, after we have this maturation, better understanding of the challenges, it will help the discussion at international level within the Codex on how to try to have the same approaches, at least the same scientific approaches, when it comes to the evaluation of the safety or risk assessment for those novel foods. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this is to think about. Thanks a lot. It's time for a coffee break. It was meant to be, yeah, I think we can do with 25 minutes. So please be back at 10:30.